Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Karachi and in this video we're going to talk about hacking web servers. Now, by the end of this module, you should be able to describe web applications, explain web application vulnerabilities, describe the tools used to attack web servers. Now, writing a program without bugs is difficult, Basically, think about it this way. The bigger is the program, the more features you add to it, the more bugs or defects are possible. And also, the more people get involved in developing this application, the bigger risk of security vulnerabilities. There's also other factors like, the human factor. This is, like the one I just mentioned, is the human error is expected. Even the most experienced developers can make mistakes. Complexity, you know the more application or features or the more things you add to it, okay, the more component you increase, in other words, making it hard basically to foresee all possible states and conditions. Sometimes resources constraints, often developers are working under tight deadlines, which may result in less time for good testing. Language limitations also. Some programming languages themselves may have limitation that could lead to bug, like C and C++. Those, these languages provide direct memory management capabilities. However, the flexibility comes at the cost of potential issues that's very well known, like buffer overflow or memory leaks. Now, when it comes to web application components, we have static web pages, we have dynamic web pages. Now, the static, it's very important to understand the difference between static and dynamic web pages because each one of them comes with its own advantages and disadvantages concerning, security, scalability, and maintainability. Now, the static web pages basically offer security advantages such as reduced attack surface, due to the fact, there are fewer client-server interactions, which minimizes risk like injection attacks or even cross-site scripting. They also benefit from simplified hosting, as they don't require server-side scripting or database connectivity, which means it reduces the components that could be exploited. Also, the content is finer. They generally don't require session management, further reducing vulnerabilities in this case. However, these pages are limited in functionality, basically, and they often rely on client-side scripting for dynamic behavior, which can introduce security risk as well. You know, Finally, any changes to the content require manual updates. This will definitely increase the potential for human errors like misconfiguration. Now, when it comes to dynamic, information is displayed varies. Uh, Dynamic offer enhanced security features, such as robust user authentication and access controls, like real-time monitoring, and the ability to apply rigorous server-side validation and strong encryption algorithm for data. However, the problem here is that the complexity also increases the attack surface, making them susceptible to various vulnerabilities. I mean, including like, server-side scripting, database, third-party services, as well as SQL injection attacks, and more. You know, there are many different tools here, like JavaScript, XML, CGI, and Java server pages, and other things. We're gonna cover, give you some idea about each one of them briefly. Now, web forms, the form element in HTML, allow customers to submit information to web server. Some form can be quite long and ask for a lot of information, and some may have very short input fields here. Web servers use web application to process this such a form. Now, using form elements, in HTML, by the way, introduces multiple security risks that need to be mitigated. Now, those risks range from injection attacks like a cross-site scripting or SQL injection due to improper sanitization of user input. Now, to insecure also data transmission, if SSL or TLS is not implemented or there is a bug in the SSL, client-side logic risk also exists in the client computers. Especially the reliance on client-side validation and browser autofill features. All these contribute to the type of vulnerabilities that might happen. Now, let's look at Common Gateway Interface, CGI. You know, Basically, CGI is one of the earliest methods of creating dynamic content on the web, and it has been largely outdated by more efficient and feature-rich technologies like PHP, ASP.NET, and even JavaScript frameworks. Okay, now the thing that CGI handles moving data from web server to a web browser. So basically, it takes information from the database right here. So in other words, like when the user requests, here's the user when through the web browser requests a CGI program through a web page, the web server processes the request by launching a specific CGI script or executable. In this case, passing the information to the user after it pulls out the information from the database. Now, see, the CGI enables web designer to create also dynamic HTML web application. Many dynamic web pages are created with CGI and scripting language, and so on. Now, from a security perspective, CGI is susceptible to a variety of security vulnerabilities, which includes command injection, insecure file handling, and buffer overflows. Other risks, may involve information disclosure through improper error handling and including the lack of input validation leading to injection attacks. And also, let's not forget about the poor session management, exposing system to, hijacking, and some other risks. Now, this is just a very brief look at the CGI programs. It's not a programming class. CGI programs can be written in many programming and scripting languages like C and C++, parallel language, Visual Basic, Java. And, this is just a simple example of CGI. Here you can see that here, this line, for example, indicate that the script should be executed using the parallel interpreter located at this location right here. Now, this line specified the HTTP header for the response. And this line, basically, as you see, using the print, it will output the message to the screen. Now, there are many third-party frameworks and libraries. A few hundreds of frameworks designed to make programming easier, like Spring, JSF, SAS, Vadin. The issue here, you need to keep in mind that as third-party libraries grow in popularity, keeping them current and secure becomes very challenging. Okay, and in the same time, very important to do this. Now, because the failing of doing this, basically, any one of these will be exposed, the application built on these framework to vulnerabilities. And the worst part, like if you import an outdated third-party libraries, then they may have known security flaws or may no longer receive security updates. Now, let's look at something very popular, the active server pages. Here we have ASP and ASP.NET. Those are used by developers to display HTML documents to users on the fly. Now, ASP has been succeeded by ASP.NET, which was introduced back in 2002 as part of .NET framework. Now, the ASP.NET is a server-side web application framework designed for web development to produce basically the focus on what? Developing dynamic web pages. Uses a compiled server-side language, like C# and .NET framework, and also it enables developers to build dynamic interactive web pages using any one of these scripting language. However, just keep in mind that not all web servers support, ASP or ASP.NET. Now, this is just a simple example of ASP pages here. Here you see that this is HTML format. The head here, basically, section contains the meta information about the HTML document. Now, in our case here, it has only one child element, which is the title right here. The content, basically, within the title tags, my first ASP.NET web pages determine basically the title of the web page that the user will see it in the title bar. Now here we have the body. This is the start of the body. This is the close of the body. Now basically the body tag defines the main content of the HTML document here. Okay, so the H1 tag is used for primary heading, which is in this case, hello security professionals. Browsers typically display the text, within the H1 tags as large and bold, And here you could see that the date, time, that now, this is a property provided by the .NET framework, and basically it will returns the current date and time showing on the server here. Now, Apache server also is one of very well-known servers here, and it's very popular as well. As of September 2023, Apache Web Servers has a market share of 31.2% according to W3 Tech Share, compared to IIS, the one that runs on Microsoft server platforms. Advantages that it works in just any Unix, Linux, and even Windows platform. The good part, it's free. And basically, you just have to run the HTTPD, like if you want to run it within Kali Linux. It's very simple. Now, using scripting languages, web pages, many web pages has been developed using those scripting languages, either Visual Basic or JavaScript. Now, the Visual Basic script can be used to create interactive web pages that usually respond to user input. You could use it to create a form that allow users to enter their email and their name, and so on. Now, the JavaScript can be used to create dynamic web pages that change the content based on the user input. Now here there are many, by the way, security testing tools are written with scripting languages, and here just a quick overview so you could learn the difference between the Visual Basic script versus the JavaScript. And when it comes to developers, I mean, it used to be in Netscape, that was like in old days, case sensitivity operators, scripting type. Here you could see that now the Visual Basic script supports both client-side and server-side scripting. Now the JavaScript is primary for client-side scripting. Now the Visual Basic script is not as widely used as JavaScript. On the contrary, the JavaScript more widely used than Visual Basic script. Now, we have also another programming language, PHP, which enables creation of dynamic web pages, pretty much similar to ASP and ASP.NET. It's basically an open source server-side scripting language. You know, you could basically do it when you develop it, you could embed it inside the HTML web page by using this tag right here. Okay, user cannot see the PHP code on a web browser. Simply try to go into the source code of any web page that uses PHP and you will never see it. Why? Simply because the PHP web pages run on a server. Now, originally used mainly on Unix system. However, now we could see it in Macintosh and Windows machine. Now, this is a very good example, simple example of static PHP web page showing here HTML, the head, and here's the title, and here when you open, the body, you close the body and HTML. Now let's look at this one over here. Now, the first one, the first part right here, you see, I'm circling around it. This is the PHP tag that tells the interpreter that this code is basically written in PHP. This is how you would know. Now, the echo here, this is PHP echo statement used to output text to the browser, you know. Now here you have the H1, okay, hello security testers, and that's where you close it. That's the text that is being output, okay. And then here basically the semicolon right here used to terminate the statement in PHP. And finally here the question, the question mark. This is the end of the PHP tag that you started from here, you ended right here. Now there's also another programming language called Cold Fusion. It's a server-side scripting language. You could use it to develop dynamic web pages. It's owned by Adobe. It uses its own proprietary tags, and it's written in this language, Cold Fusion Markup Language, CFML. Now, basically, the CFML web pages is a tagged-based scripting language that helps creating dynamic web pages and database access in a web server environment. It is a combination of HTML, XML, and scripting language, and can also contain other client-side technologies like if you use HTML and JavaScript. Now, if you look at this example here for CFML, here you could see the CFL location and URL and link and add token no. Now, in this example here, the URL attribute is set to this domain name. Now, this means that the user will be redirected to the website, the one you see it on the screen here. Now, the add token attribute is set to no, which means no token will be added to the URL. And just by the way, a token is basically a unique identifier that is used to track the user's session. Keep in mind that the CF location, this is a very powerful tool that can be used to control the flow of the application built into, using the Cold Fusion. And basically, you could use it to redirect users to different pages, applications, or domains, of course, depending on the needs of the application. Now, here we have JavaScript. As I stated before, it's a client-side scripting language mainly used in the web browsers, which helps in creating interactive and dynamic web pages. It has the power of programming languages. You could create functions and procedure in HTML web pages and widely used. However, there are quite a number of vulnerabilities have been exploited in older web browser. Therefore, security tester and administrator should inspect every computer for unpatched or outdated browser version because it definitely will facilitate the process of hacking here. Okay, so Many web pages basically display, your company's information to users, which is usually are stored in a database server. you know Obviously those web application, they need to connect to the database server through something they call it connectors or drivers, designed for very specific type of DBMS, because we can we could have different type of DBMS, and they have their own drivers designed for specific needs. Now, the good thing about these connectors or drivers, they basically deals with the complexity of establishing the connection, like sending queries, retrieving results, abstracting the complexities, and ensuring the application can interact with database efficiently. Now, the technology used, okay, like in the connectors or drivers, to the database server may vary depending on operating system. But when it comes to the theory, they are all the same. Now, let's look at the first one, you know, the Open Database Connectivity, ODBC, a standard database access method developed by SQL Access Group. Now, it has an interface here, which basically it allows these application right here, you see like Excel or SPSS or others, to access the data stored in a different type of database. Here you can see MySQL, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, okay, which basically called DBMS, database management system. Okay, so basically these system, they should recognize and issue the ODBC commands, and make sure to to interact with it. Now, the good thing about it is that when it comes to interoperability, is accomplished by defining the following. The first one is standardized representation for data types. Now, what does it mean? It means that data types in those databases refer to the kind of data that can be stored on the tables on any one of these. You see it on the screen here. Like for example, integers, floating point numbers, strings, and so on. So the standardized representation ensures that regardless of the type of DBMS they're using, the data types will be recognized and correctly interpreted by the receiving system, okay, correctly, well, simply to avoid issues like data corruption or misinterpretation. Now, library of ODBC function calls that allow application to connect to DBMS, you know, basically this is like, think about it this way. The ODBC is a standardized API for accessing the DBMS. You could see it here. The library of the ODBC function calls is like a bridge, basically, between those application and the different DBMS. You see it on the screen here. Now, it has a standard method of connecting to and logging into DBMS. Like for example, like you can specify DBMS and its location. It comes to IP address and the port. It can provide you with authentication credential. Like you need to enter username and a password, and configuring additional parameters like encryption, for example, connection time, and more. Now, the object linking and embedding database, OLEDP, it's a set of interfaces that enable applications to access data stored in a DBMS. It is designed by Microsoft. Why? Basically, because Microsoft wants to provide faster, more efficient, and more stable than ODBC. It relies on connection strings. Now, basically, a connection strings, think about it as like a sequence of parameters, and these parameters basically can include details like the type of a data source, the location of the data source, if there's any authentication credential needed, or any necessary information here. Now, there would be a different providers can be used depending on a data source. And here you can see there's a provider, another provider for different type of data source. And these are the data source right here. So basically, these are components each one of these that expose the data to the OLE DB clients, like what you see on the screen. So you need different providers for a different type of DBMS. Now, from security perspective, and that's what we're concerned about, you should include sanitizing inputs to prevent basically SQL injection attacks. You need to have a secure communication channels, between the components and the system here, and ensuring proper authentication and authorization on the application, okay, before the user can access those DBMS. Now, this is just different type of providers here. For example, we have the Microsoft Active Directory service, and this is how the drivers will look like. So the providers will look like, and like for example, Microsoft Jet. This is how it looks like. MySQL, and so on. Now let's look at Active X Data Object (ADO). Now, this was developed by Microsoft. It's act like a middleware layer between the programming languages and OLEDB, which is a means of accessing data stores, whether databases or not, in uniform manner. Now, according to Microsoft website, ADO is used in C++ and Visual Basic programs to connect to SQL Server and other database. It can also talk to Azure SQL database in the cloud. It enables client application to access and manipulate data from various sources through the OLEDB provider. Also, it has many features for building client-side and web-based application. Now, it is primary benefits, according to Microsoft, that makes it easy to use, high speed, low memory overhead, and a small disk footprint. Okay, so the good thing here for developers, it helps them to write the programs that access the data, without knowing how the database is implemented. Okay, the only thing they need to worry about, is the database. For connection database is for connection only, which is something we discussed it previously. Now let's try to understand web application vulnerabilities. Now here we could see that there are many platforms, many programming languages out there. It can be used to design website. Now, it doesn't matter what type of platform, you as a security professional needs to do pen testing or assess the system and examine any possible vulnerabilities there, that can be exploited by attackers. You know, uh, we know that network security is important, application security as important as network security. Sometimes they call it AppSec. Okay, and in old days, unfortunately, many professionals they overlooked it. Okay, because it is specialized practice. The security profession who wants to examine these stuff, they need to have a strong background in applications. But the problem here is that what if an attacker exploited vulnerabilities and got a hold of the web server, simply they could deface the website, they could destroy the database, or they could, or steal it and sell it, gain control of all user accounts information, okay, or even perform secondary attacks from the web server. And even the worst part, they could gain access to other servers that are part of the network infrastructure. Now, let's look at application vulnerabilities and countermeasures, a very well-known OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project. This is not-for-profit organization. You could find, basically it focus on finding and, provide some education and about web application vulnerabilities, and it publishes the 10 most critical web application security risk paper, and basically it's built into payment card industry, data security standard. This is, the PCI used by e-commerce. If you want to accept credit card payments from the clients, they must comply with the PCI. Now, a security tester might need to analyze vulnerabilities, such as the following in the OWASP, the top 10. And I encourage everyone in information security to visit this website every once in a while and learn about injection vulnerabilities, application flaws and weakness, sensitive data exposure, XML external entities, broken access control, security misconfiguration, cross-site scripting, insecure deserialization, using components with known vulnerabilities, insufficient logging and monitoring. And there's something very interesting provided by OWASP. They offer broken web app and web GOAT. Now, web GOAT is basic online utility. It helps those new in the field as a pen tester or ethical hackers, to understand the web application vulnerabilities covered in this list. Now, the Web GOAT project helps you to learn how to do vulnerability testing. A lot of people do, a lot of people, they still use it, for learning. Now, here you can see this is a simple WebGoat start page, when you create username and password there. Okay. And here you can see the HTTP basics. Now, if you look very closely here, it takes into a series of studies for each those top 10. Okay, keep in mind this might change every year depending on the report by OWASP. But here you can see that WebGoat's the HTTP basic exercise is designed by them, to help you to familiar, with to understand the foundational HTTP concepts. Basically, participants learn about request to response nature of HTTP. You will learn about the primary HTTP methods like GET, POST, and others. You will learn how to manipulate and inspect HTTP requests using tools, and some other techniques. Now here, this is another one with the focus on SQL injection. Here you could see the concept and what's the goal of this. Learn about SQL injection attacks here. Now here about admin lost page. Also, this is another challenge page. Welcome to WebCode Challenge CTF. Here the challenges contains more CTF like lessons where we do not provide any explanation what you need to do. No hints will be provided. It's very interesting. And again, I encourage everyone to download it and run it. Now, here we have another very important topic here we talk about is that web application test execution. There are two techniques over here. The first one is the static application security testing and the dynamic one. And there are interactive application security testing. Let's look at each one of them, try to understand the difference between them. Now, the static one evaluate the source code of the software application without executing the program. That's why we call the static application testing. This form of testing aims to identify vulnerabilities, flaws, and compliance issues in application code base, okay, especially during the early stages of the software development lifecycle, SDLC. Look at it as a proactive approach, aids in mitigating potential threats and reduces the cost and complexity of addressing, all these vulnerabilities later on in the development stage. And there are many, many examples here you could see, like Fortify code, static code analyzer, so it's something to explore. Now, dynamic application security one, example, you could use the OWASP, it's a security assessment approach, by the way, that focus on analyzing running application to check for vulnerabilities that might be exploited. And here you could see, if you go back to what I explained about the OWASP ZAP, you're having a running application, a running web pages here, you know. So this real-time analysis is crucial for pinpointing vulnerabilities that may only become evident when the application is active and interactive with users. And again, if you go back to this, you could see that there is interaction with that thing here in OWASP, you know. So now we have another one's called interactive application security testing, you know, and that basically combine both of these two elements right here. Uses an agent inside the application to perform its analysis in real time at any point in the development process. Now, information gathering and architecture mapping. A security tester should look for answers to some important questions. Does the application have a database? Does the application require authentication? Is it a static or dynamic pages? Which languages or platform does the application use? This is very important, including those two also as well. You know, are there devices between your web browser and application designed to stop attacks? And how does the data flow in the application? So you could see here, these questions are important because they can help you as a pen tester identify potential vulnerabilities based on the design. Like, for example, like if the application has a database, then it is important to check for SQL injection attacks or vulnerabilities. If the application requires authentication, then in this case, you need to look for weak passwords or other authentication vulnerabilities. Now, if it's static or dynamic pages, it's important to check for cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. And also, the language and the platform the application uses also has a major impact on the security. You know, like if the application that use older or less secure languages, or platform may be vulnerable to attack. Of course, here we talk about devices between the web browser and the application, as I show you in the previous slides, plays a major role in security. Like a firewall can help to protect application from attacks from the internet, especially if it was application firewall. A web application firewall, basically, it's very important topic that you need to learn more about it. And how does the data flow in application? Is there any sensitive data there? Is it encrypted? Or what's the deal here? You know. So, however, there are, when it comes to authentication and session testing, by the way, there are many web applications require that a server other than the web server authenticates user. You know, like examine how information is passed between the two servers. Is an encrypted channel used for, or is data passed in clear text? Is the server used for authentication properly configured and patched? Are login and password information stored and secure? So, here's some question: Is an encrypted channel used? Well, if the information is not passed over an encrypted channel, then it is vulnerable to eavesdropping. Of course, you need to know what type of encryption algorithm is used. Some are stronger than others. And also need to think about, okay, is the encryption properly configured? If it's not, then it's vulnerable to attacks. Is the server used for authentication properly configured and patched? If not, then you know what's going to happen. It's going to be vulnerable to attacks. Okay, so let's talk about authorization testing. Authorization basically is checking user privilege to allow or deny access to resources. Now, application developers commonly use hidden fields in the tables on obscured URL to enforce their access control instead of checking user privileges. Now, what is the hidden fields in the tables, what is it? It could be HTML forms that contain input fields, okay, that users interact with. I mean, some of these forms can also hide, uh, input fields that are not displayed in user browser and sent back to the server when it's submitted. Now, it can be misused. Like some developers use this hidden fields to store sensitive information or control parameters that affect the application's behavior, believing that since the user cannot see them, they cannot modify them. Now, what is the risk of this type? Well, attacker can inspect the HTML source code or developer tools to identify hidden ones. There are many tools out there like Burp Suite or Postman can easily intercept and modify the values in these hidden fields, before it's sent to the server. Now, the other one, the obscured URL, it's basically a URL that contains parameters or identifiers. How it is misused? Well, simply, developers believe that by merely obscuring the structure of this URL, they can hide or protect specific resources. Wrong. Why? Because the risk there, okay, is what? Is a determined attacker can often discover this, using different type of methods like directory brute forcing, it could be like intercepting network traffic or analyzing JavaScript files. So authorization testing is very important because it does reveal major security concern. This is very important part of application testing here. Now, very important concept here is called input validation, the act of filtering, rejecting, or sanitizing user untrusted input field or input information before the application processing. Now, the problems, if it's not done correctly, it can lead to data disclosure, data will be displayed on the screen, um, alteration of some information, even destruction. So as a pen tester, you need to check for possibility of SQL injection used to attack the system. Now, the SQL injection, SQLI attackers, basically they could send some certain commands when prompted to fill in a web application here. Let's look at some example here. SQL injection example. And here in this example here, basically, you can see it here, is the attacker is trying to retrieve all data from the customer table. The first part is here, select, a star from a customer. Basically, it's a standard SQL query that would return all rows in the customer table. Now, the second part here, okay, that's the interesting part. The where username, okay, equal, or one equal one, basically, and password equal is that's the bad part over here. That's the malicious part of the query. Uh, Basically, the one you see it in red is always true. So the where closure, he will always evaluate to true. This means what? That the attacker will be able to retrieve all rows in the customer table here, okay, regarding of the value entered here. You could see that, regarding of the value entered over here, for the username and a password. And that's a major flaw. So as a result, the SQL query will return every record from the customer table without checking the password. This would work simply if the application is poorly designed. Okay. Now, security testers should test any web application when performing a security test and are authorized in writing to do so. The basic testing should look for whether you can enter text containing punctuation marks, or whether you can enter a single quotation mark followed by any SQL word, keywords, you know, whether you can get any database error when attempting to inject SQL statement. And this is something we're gonna discuss it very soon. Now, sometimes a web application will give a tester no indication, by the way, that SQL statement was run. Basically, it doesn't show you nothing on the screen. And OWASP call it the blind SQL injection. It has its own set of tests that are required for detection. You know, like for example, such as using prepared statement and input validation. Now, by the way, there are two types of blind SQL injection. Basically the blind one, the blind based SQL injection, basically the attacker determines the true or falsehood of injected queries by observing the application responses here when they try to enter some information. Like, for example, if injecting 1 = 1, which is always true, as I discussed before, statement in a query makes the application behave differently than injecting like something like 1 = 2, always false statement. So the attacker can infer that the location is vulnerable to SQL. Now, the IME-based also blind SQL injection, attackers determines the application vulnerability by causing it to wait, basically, okay? Causing it to wait for a specific amount of time before responding. Like, for example, like if they use something called, a SQL function called sleep or wait for delay. So the attacker can make the database pause for a certain number of seconds. Now, if the application's response is delayed by the same number of seconds the attacker has entered, then the attacker can say, okay, now I'm gonna have a very successful SQL injection attack. So it's good idea to become familiar with those stuff, the SQL injection, the blind one in particular. Now, error handling is a web application can be configured or written to handle errors in a variety of ways. Developers can enable debugging. Why? Simply because it provides them with rich logging information to help them diagnose some issue. However, the problem is what? If the debugging mode is left on, which I've seen it previously before, it can provide rich source information for attackers. Like for example, what type of database server they're running and which table produce an error. I've seen this before. And sometimes, depending on the type of database, you basically will be able to know, oh, okay, this database belongs to this type of operating system. Think about it this way, like Microsoft SQL Server. So definitely it runs on a Windows server. So, however, developers should minimize the amount of information shared with users when an application encounters an error. There are different best practices. Provide them with generic error messages. Logging. Well, make sure the logs are protected and access to them is restricted. Okay, input validation, we spoke about it. Failure modes anticipate how software components might fail and plan for those scenarios. They call this the FMEA in some industries, failure mode and effects analysis. You know, another thing, incorporate security headers, like content security policy, CSP, to mitigate potential impact of certain types of attacks. Use error handling frameworks. Many programming languages and platforms provide error handling libraries or frameworks that can assist in, generating safe error messages here. Now, that's interesting concept here. It's called the business logic testing. What is the business logic? It's the process of evaluating application functionality and workflow simply to identify any possible vulnerabilities from a flawed or incorrect business logic. So the focus, the business logic testing on design flaws and misuse scenario. Like for example, before a wire transfer, a user must first satisfy the requirements of having at least that amount of money in the transfer account. So if the user does not have adequate fund, then there should be no transfer. There are many methodologies involved in doing the business logic testing. A common one is the threat modeling, which basically need to understand the application, the workflows, and what potential threat, So this basically will guide the areas of focus during testing. Here you got also the functional flaw identification. You need to identify all functional flaws of the application. Misuse cause development. Think like an attacker and identify all potential misuse scenario. And also test execution means you need to execute the misuse scenarios and functional flows, noting any sort of deviation from what is expected from the application. Now, let's look at the client-side testing. This is something actually very important to understand, you know. Now, it happens when it happens from code executing on the server machine, typically within the web browser. Now, the client side controls could be insufficient on their own and should be paired with server side controls that cannot be bypassed. This is important. Now, there are, okay, so you might be asking, okay, what type of client-side issues here? Well, cross-site scripting, click jacking attacks, occurs when attacker tricks the victim into clicking a malicious link, and then the victim will be redirected to a fraudulent website, phishing attacks, session hijacking attacks, and also another one, insecure file upload. When attackers is able to upload malicious file into application server, these files can then be executed by the application. Okay. Now, there are many, many type of tools out there that can help you to do some testing. So just remember that all platform web application components have vulnerabilities. It doesn't matter what type of platform is used to develop a web application, there must be a security hole. On my YouTube channel, I have 3 different types of web vulnerability scanning for OpenVAS, and including also Nessus. There are also other tools can be used to scan, like OWASP, Z Attack Proxy, ZAP, Burp Suite, the Web Application Attack and Audit Framework. So it's always a good idea to explore these and become familiar with, very famous, like especially Nessus is very famous type of web application. Now, Firefox and Chrome built-in developers tools both come with similar set of developer tools, useful for an application security tester. It allows attacker basically, to view the parameters and requests. They could examine cookies, they could tamper with and resend requests. You know, like viewing parameters and requests, like what? Like those web application often send data to a server using request parameter. It is usually part of URL or in the body of a post request. Uh, you know, Browsers like Chrome, Firefox, or all others, they allow users to view cookies associated with the visited website. The tampering also with and resending requests, which means the attacker may exploit certain application vulnerabilities or bypass controls over here. Now, the Burp suite, it's included in Kali Linux, offers the tester a number of features for testing web application and web services. It's a great tool, by the way. It allows you to intercept traffic between, the client or the user web browser and the server. So basically, it provides you with a screen similar to this, like this one over here, where you could simply manipulate and inspect the request before you send it to the server. It can do crawling, scanning. It's available in three editions. Like the community edition, it's a free one, professional and enterprise. You know, you can always play around, explore the community edition. It's fine for basic web application security testing. The Zap, okay, it's a free and open source web application security scanner. It also intercept all traffic between, the browser of the user and the web application on the server. So the tester can intercept and modify requests and responses. And the Zap can work with the Burp suite as well. And here's just a screenshot of intercepting proxy. Like I said, you could modify whatever you want in it and then forward it to the server to test the server, you know. And finally, now the session has ended, and now we went over, we learned about describing web application. We explained web application vulnerabilities. We described the tools used to attack web servers. And finally, I want to thank you so much for watching this video lecture. I hope you found it useful and subscribe to my channel. Thank you again.